Welcome to Melt University's 2020 summer program. This year, our virtual intern program will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Here's your host, President and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome, students. Virtual Summer 2020, Melt University. We are rolling on. Tremendous series of podcasts, great guests, great talent, great insight, great advice. And today is going to be just like these other great podcasts. You're going to hear from the great Rick Anderson, who is the Chief Media Officer, which is an understatement of the PGA Tour. And he's going to share, we've had some great wisdom from many of our industry leaders. He's going to share a lot of great wisdom today on the business of golf, the sport of golf, and where these opportunities lie within the world of professional golf. Because you may look at it and you may see a golf tournament on television and say that's nice or something like that, but there's so many career opportunities, so many jobs, and how when you go back to your campus, getting that volunteer experience, getting that intern experience, and how that's going to relate to applying for a job with the tour, with some of the tournaments, with working with the players, the player reps, the television networks. Rick's been very vitally involved in literally billions of dollars of media rights deals, and could talk about that a little bit today. We won't forgive him. He's a Florida Gator. We got a lot of Florida Gator fans, me being the Auburn guy, but we're going to talk about his experience in college, where the passion was, where the path. He went to undergrad there, got a law degree from Florida. Says he's a recovering attorney, which is my favorite attorney. Any favorite attorney that's not running the meter up on me, Rick, is my favorite lawyer. But recovering attorney has had nearly a 25-year career with the tour. So he has seen and he's seen it all. He's seen the giant progression of the tour. The tour's leading the way, coming back with golf tournaments and fanless golf tournaments, and we'll talk about that a little bit today. Had a ton of big responsibilities at the tour, and we'll talk about willing to take on risk and new jobs, and always be willing to step up. But Rick Anderson, welcome from me and all the students of Melt University. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Vince. I'm really excited to be here, and even though you went to Auburn and I went to Florida, we're all in the SEC, and we can find a way to be friends, I'm sure.
Right, I'm sure we can find with some positive ground there for sure. So, Rick, starting out, talk about, because I've read your bio. It's mind blowing. You've had many huge responsibilities within the world of golf and the PGA Tour. Talk about the term Chief Media Officer is like what you're doing is so much bigger than that. But talk about what you do right now, on behalf of the tour.
Sure. I'm happy to do it. In so many ways, sports leagues today are becoming media companies themselves. And we see with the landscape that is out there right now, how incredibly important content is to the media landscape, to traditional media companies and newer entrants, some of which are big, huge companies themselves. And so what I do, which started off as, you would have said you were in charge of television back in the day, in the 90s, is I'm responsible for managing all aspects of the distribution of our content, both on our own platforms and via partner platforms globally, all over the world. So I manage our relationships with our current partners, CBS, NBC, and Golf Channel, and our new international relationship with Discovery, and then the 80 plus individual broadcasters that we have around the country. and manage all of our digital platforms, our production company, PGA Tour Entertainment, and really oversee what are generally relationships that we're in and responsibilities and rights that we have, but also, and this is what I've spent most of my time on the last 2 years, negotiating those deals when when a cycle comes to conclusion. And so, what I've spent most of my time on, really the last 5 years, if you want to be honest about it, is the laying in place the strategy and groundwork for the U.S. media deals that we just completed. So it's really that all of that. It's and my team. When I say I manage it, I have a team of over 200 people at PGA Tour, and in offices around the world that are actually doing the work, and I'm lucky enough to be their leader and to help them out when I can. So that's the general gist of it.
Wow, I was gonna ask you how many people you had working for you, but over 200 is impressive. So pretty much anything that our students or I would see in any platform as it relates to content through the tour, at some point you've probably had fingerprints or an imprimatur on, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, wow, that's huge, and we're gonna unpack that in a minute. But let's sort of roll it back to the University of Florida, to Gainesville. Great campus. Had a lot of great friends and time down there. You went to undergrad, so at that time you would have no idea that you would have this giant career in the business of golf, the industry of golf. Sort of talk about, because we with our kids we talk a lot about pursuing their passion, but we also talk a lot about their path, because obviously now with COVID we're kind of all going through it. Your life is not obviously going to be linear now, but you've got sort of to me, a unique background. You go to the University of Florida, then you get an undergrad, you get a legal degree, and then all of a sudden you wind up, on this journey and this path, at the tour. But so talk about the University of Florida, because they got great journalism school. They, obviously great athletic programs, and we say the campus is the ultimate professional lab. But where did this path start?
Well, there's two sort of seminal things, I guess, that probably set me on my path, and don't necessarily have anything to do with the other.
Mm-hmm.
From a very young age, I was one of these really strange kids,
Mm-hmm.
that at 11, 12 years old, I started telling my family I was going to be a lawyer, and my mother was a
Wow.
legal secretary, and we were living in Miami, and she took me up, and I wish I had an altruistic story to tell you, but I don't. And she took
Mm-hmm.
me up to her boss's office, which looked out on Biscayne Bay and was pretty nice. And I said, "Hey, what does this guy do?" And and I found out he was a lawyer, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to be a lawyer." And then, they all laughed at me, but I really arrived at the University of Florida with a plan to become a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And what that meant for me at the time was, becoming a trial lawyer. I was going to be a great courtroom attorney, and whatever I thought that meant when I was 18 years old, and I arrived there with that plan to go to law school. The other thing that it sort of set my path, I think, is playing sports myself. But then my father was a college football coach, and he was a college football coach at the University of Florida, while I was in attendance there, and even after. And so, I was very close to sports, at a very big time level. And,
Wow.
I had various jobs. I was a spring sports weightlifting coach, and I was around the
Mm-hmm.
program. I worked the football camps, and I really, I just was intrigued with sports and sort of got it a little bit. But to be honest with you, at that time in college, I was like, well, sports is really cool and everything, but I'm going to be a big time trial lawyer, right? Just the way you think about things when you're
Yeah.
that age. And so I got my degree in psychology, which is a whole different story. That was sort of my backup career plan if I went to law school and sucked at it or hated it or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
went to law school and absolutely loved it, and got did well at University of Florida, and got a job at a law firm in Atlanta, Troutman Sanders, which I'm sure you know,
Oh yeah.
being in Atlanta, and this is one of my first lessons for your students, and one of the things that's been so powerful for me in my career is when I did my summer internship at Troutman Sanders, I was all slated to be a corporate lawyer. I had realized by then that there were actually real lawyers that weren't in the courtroom, and the business side of it seemed much more interesting to me. But I was going to go in and do, big transactions, mergers and acquisitions and so forth. This is not now 1990. And I arrived at Troutman Sanders, walked in the first day, and a young partner said to me, "Hey, have you ever thought about working in intellectual property? The firm has decided that they're going to get into the intellectual property law practice, and what would you be interested in doing that?" And I said, "Okay, sure." And it was not in my plan. It was not what I thought I was going to do. And I was asked to do it, and it sounded interesting, and I did it. And that set me off on the path that leads me to where I am today. And the condensed version of that is I was on the ground floor when the firm started its practice. By my fifth year at Troutman Sanders, I was running the trademark law department of Troutman Sanders. And I found myself saying, now coming full circle, having a few sports clients, which Troutman had, and in intellectual property, which is so central to sports.
Oh, yeah.
Man, if I could only do what I'm doing now in sports, that would be amazing. And I'll stop in a second and let you take me where you want to take me, but. A friend of mine heard that the PGA Tour was hiring an intellectual property lawyer in 1995,
Wow.
and since I was now an intellectual property lawyer, it was a path into sports, and I sent my resume down and got the job in
Well,
1995.
so I mean, you've made some unbelievable points. So let's unpack that for a minute. So, unwittingly or wittingly, you had exposure to the great sports programs at the University of Florida, and on many campuses, many SEC campuses, there are great sports programs, there are great athletic programs, but behind those programs, behind the players, the athletes, the coaches, there are an enormous amount of people that make these trains run on time, and we talk to our students a lot about that. So unwittingly, you had that exposure. Then you had this plan, you had this path, you had this passion to be an attorney, but you get to the law firm, and so think about taking the shot. Think about it when the colleague of yours said you may want to try intellectual property. If you'd have said, "Nah, I really want to be a trial lawyer. I really want to have courtroom drama, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera," but instead, you were willing to be open. You were willing to be open to other opportunities. You would be willing to take chances and take risk and all of those things. And so the learning of the IP, and obviously, Troutman is an unbelievably successful, great law firm. Then that experience tethered you from your exposure to sports to the IP experience, and allowed you to take that shot at the PGA. But talk about, because I had a similar experience at Auburn. I had my first journalism class and was taught by the head of sports information, and he described it, and I was like, man, I want to be over there. And I went up to him after class and volunteered, and the rest is history. But talk about the importance of taking that shot, taking that risk. Don't be so um, you know paralyzed or hell bent on one area, because it certainly got you on this massively amazing path.
Yeah, and it is something that I feel very passionate about, and whenever I talk to students, it's one of the primary points I make, and it is so important in your life to have a plan, and I believe firmly in that. But you also have to approach your career in particular, and probably your life in general, but your career with an open mind,
Mhm.
and really have the willingness to take an opportunity that isn't on your plan necessarily, and that is without question, what I did at that point in my career when I walked in the door of the law firm. If my 55-year-old self would go back and be able to see that opportunity, I would have jumped onto the partner's desk and said, "Yes, of course," because
Right,
what an amazing thing to be handed to you, to
right.
get involved in an incredibly up and coming area on your first day. But I did have some apprehension even in that point. I was like, "Oh yeah, well, I was going to do this, but okay, I'll give it a try." And especially when you're starting out in your career, and really even later in your career, having an open mind and having a willingness to deviate from your plan will inevitably make all the difference in the world. And the other thing I say to folks is it's okay. It's okay to deviate from your plan, and it's
Right.
also maybe if that doesn't even work out the way you think it did. In my case, it did. But you will reach farther heights, I'm convinced, if you take that approach.
Well, and we hear a lot of examples of that because even when we were interviewing Ty Votaw, he was going to be a corporate lawyer and then encountered Charlie Meacham, and all of a sudden he winds up at the LPGA, and the rest is history there. We've talked to Shannon Watkins of Aflac and Tia Cummings of Bevel and Walker Brands. They went to school to be doctors. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I want to be a brand marketer. And so, to your point, have a plan, but stay flexible and keep an open mind, and which leads me to my next topic. Like, okay, so Rick Anderson's a lawyer, he's an intellectual property lawyer, but you have worn so many hats at the PGA Tour, which tells me, and I'm trying to communicate to these students early on, like, be willing to wear hats, be willing to say yes, be willing to take assignments that you might not be comfortable with or push you out of your comfort zone, or you may even think you're not qualified for or overqualified for, because you are a poster child for that willingness, even if it was out of your comfort zone or what was not necessarily defined as a sort of a legal exercise or activity within the tour, correct?
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I within a year probably of coming in and taking the job as intellectual property counsel, which was a full time job in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was asked by my boss at the time, and the guy who was my mentor for many years, to sort of drop what I was doing and come up and help him work on the contracts for the television deals that had just been done. And this is now not like 1997, and I had never worked on a television agreement and didn't really know what I was doing. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I went up and I worked on it with him, and the law, like a lot of areas that your students are involved in, Vince, is an apprenticeship. Really, you go to school, but you really learn what you're doing on the job, and that's what I did. And got involved in the media space in that way, and then my professional career has seen the evolution of media, from really just being about television, well, really from being about broadcast television to cable television to the birth of digital platforms. And I was in the middle of all of that and working alongside business people
Mm-hmm.
that were encountering all these things for the first time. And what I tried to do in my career was just sort of understand that I had a role to fill, which was being a lawyer, but I would really just try to be another smart person that was going through this evolution with these other people to try to figure out what we were doing
Right.
and build some businesses along the way. And I wasn't hired to do any of that, and I wasn't really trained to do it, but I evolved into it and just and maybe the message here is just being willing to make a contribution and don't be so focused on what your exact job is at that moment. You need to do your job for sure, but you can make a contribution that exceeds the sort of normal expectations for that. And I that's I learned all that stuff as I went along, and was
That's amazing.
eventually, alongside of all that, was became the chief legal officer and built a team. Of course, I started the same year that Tiger turned pro, so
Wow.
luck
Wow.
is important too. But I joined a company that was essentially a mom and pop company that
Hmm.
exploded into a sophisticated business over the last 25 years. And so, rode along with that, learning as I went,
Hmm.
and to the point where I was finally, in 2010, I guess, about 15 years in, asked to shift over and lead the media team. So it's been an incredible journey, and that's in a short period of time the best way I can describe it.
Well, and you just made several key points. Be invaluable to your organization and your team. Be indispensable. You will be asked to do some things, and the more value you create, the more value you deliver when those opportunities for promotions come up, or new jobs or new divisions in organizations. That's one thing we're continuing to impress upon our kids, and also, you know, um, this generation sort of gets a reputation for hopping around every 6 to 12 months, and but if and which is fine, but if you're not planted somewhere for a long period of time, or even 2 or 3 years, you're not going to get those opportunities. And so I think that's a huge point: being valuable, being indispensable. But you mentioned mentors, and we talk a lot to our students about the importance and value of mentors. And mentors can come in, lots of different packages and shape, form, and sizes. They don't necessarily have to be older. You can find them on campus: teachers, professors, coaches, career counselors, fellow peers. But talk about the value of mentors, even at an individual at your level, of their importance to you, probably even still today.
Yeah, it can't be overstated how incredibly important that is. I start from the place that you can and should learn from everyone that you encounter, and you should always, especially in a professional setting, have that mindset that everyone, whether they're your boss or your peer or somebody that works for you, you should always have the mindset that you can learn something from them, and it
Mhm.
starts there. And then you do, if you're approaching your relationships that way, you will encounter those people that really resonate with you, and that you feel you can have a lot to learn from, and that you find willing to take that role with you. And I've had a couple of those in my career, that have been so important, and really helped define who I am. And I will say this too: as you move on in your careers, becoming a mentor
Mhm.
is also incredibly important. And if you ask me, to list my top three job responsibilities today, I would tell you that, managing and developing people, it might be one. It's certainly in the top three. And so that is an incredibly important part of your development, and then eventually of your leadership and management of teams.
And you just hit the nail on the head. So a couple of great segues. my opinion, the PGA is a model. The tour is a model for developing talent. I've known several kids who've been through the program. We've had, some of the younger kids from the program speak. Obviously, Allison Fillmore from the Tour Championship has been a very important part of our intern program in the past, and she's a great mentor. But I think the PGA Tour is a model for identifying talent and how you train them, and then it's also one of the most sophisticated media companies in the world. You hit the nail on the head. And you being on the very forefront of all of this sophisticated global media, the multi-billion-dollar deal with Discovery, and a week before COVID hits, you're camped out in Bristol, and sign sealing and delivering some of those deals. Great timing on that. But if you were advising kids and students as mentors today, um, and this is a two-part question, where are the future opportunities, not only with the tour, but in any professional sports league driven by this new area of consumption and sophistication of content? In Rick Anderson's perch or purvey, where would you tell these kids to really begin sharpening their tools?
Well, the great news is there's so many places to plug in, and I obviously in a sports league or a sports team, there are so many facets to it, which I'm sure, you cover in your program, media being one of them. And from the media standpoint, the fundamental, I would say, is if you can be a content creator right now,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is sort of the big opportunity that I see,
Mm-hmm.
and I say that because of the way people consume sports now, and because of what fans find interesting beyond watching the game,
Mm-hmm.
or and watching television, the ability to be a content creator, that can mean anything from being on a sideline with a cell phone, or doing a behind the scenes show, or having that mindset of telling stories. I think that we find that we are searching high and low for people that have that gift, and have
Mm-hmm.
that experience. And so anybody that sort of has that mindset that they can move toward that part of the job, I think that that's a big opportunity today that I see. If you ask me who can I not find, it's young people that are focused in that direction. And most of the kids, today, will be pretty savvy as it relates
Oh,
to
yeah.
technology and digital platforms. That just sort of comes with being the age that they are. But if they
Right.
can convert that into understanding how to, what kind of content would be interesting, I think that's the biggest opportunity. And then beyond that, there's the traditional um, parts of journalism, and television production, live production, and then the whole business side of it as well. And which comes into people who might be looking at law degrees or business
Mm-hmm.
degrees. You're negotiating rights deals and things of that nature. So there's a plethora of opportunity. There's no shortage that I see coming anytime soon, because like there's just more and more content on the horizon.
Well, and you just hit the nail on the head. And the the reason I'm so bullish to our kids on so many career opportunities in the world of professional golf. So if you look, there's tournaments in every city, and not only tour tournaments. There's the LPGA, there's your senior PGA, there's the Corn Ferry, there is there's just there's so many opportunities, and so you don't necessarily have to migrate to a major city like Atlanta to work at the Tour Championship. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and then you peel it back. you've got fan experience. You've got day of. You've got corporate hospitality, sponsorship fulfillment, ticketing, data, analytics. I mean, it's like you know everybody says, all right, well, here's an NFL team, but there are only 32 NFL teams. There are literally thousands of opportunities to work in the world of professional golf, and that's why I appreciate you being on and Ty being on. So, and as I've said, to me, the tour is a model of identifying talent, grooming talent, training talent, pushing the talent out into your owned and operated, operations. And clearly, you probably get hundreds and thousands of applications. But what stands out to both the organization and Rick Anderson? What are you looking for from these kids? Kind of take them behind the scenes that says, man, this really gets my attention. This kid could be a star for our organization. What's the secret sauce for our kids who are going to be out looking? What are you looking for? What gets your attention?
Well, setting aside sort of experience, right? Which a young kid coming out of college can't help the fact that he's a young kid coming out of college.
Sure.
So, but that does factor into it somewhat for us. But I think it's intention and interest and passion for something, whether it's the game of golf or it's storytelling, like I just mentioned, or whatever path that you're setting on. Demonstrating. Not only did I go to school and get a degree in marketing, but I did an internship at Melt. I've been focused on these areas and building myself to be ready to enter the job world. I think that's probably with a person coming right out of college, probably what strikes our attention the most is sort of that demonstrated interest and passion in something that they're looking to get into.
Well, and Ty made a great point about it. It's like, and this is my pet peeve, is if I get a generic resume and I get a generic outreach and it says, hey, I want to be in sports and here's my resume and I need to make $1. The same thing with Ty said. He said, sometimes he'll get a resume that says, hey, I really love to play golf and I want to go to work for the PGA Tour. That's an automatic flush. That's what we tell them. It's just, you're going to get flushed automatically. And so to your point, show that intensity, show that interest, show that intellectual curiosity, show that passion and show that passion. So you've had this amazing career, but we tell our kids, and we're all living through it right now, but at some point they're going to get thrown off the saddle. There's no doubt of if, but when they're going to get thrown off the saddle and make a mistake or overcome an obstacle. COVID-19 clearly is an obstacle. And in your stellar career, you've probably had to overcome a thing or two, right? I mean, you've had an obstacle. What was that? And how did you overcome this? Because like I said, you're operating at a very high level here.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just, there's no big particular thing to point out, but you're going to make mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to be involved in something or in charge of something and you're going to get something wrong. It happens. It's happened to me. It happens to everybody in business. And the thing that I have learned along the way is you have to own it. You have to accept responsibility for it. You have to ask, how do I make it right? And then make it right and move on immediately and continue to do a great job and don't dwell on it. Don't try to say it wasn't your fault when it was. Own it and fix it and move on. That's my advice on that.
I tell you what, that is great advice, students. I want you to replay that and re-listen to it. We all make mistakes, and just own it. Say, hey, look, I made a mistake. I was wrong. We always encourage our students to make mistakes full speed. What can I learn from this mistake? Be willing to accept that constructive criticism and grow from it and learn from it. It's not personal. So I think that is amazing advice. And so as we wrap up this fascinating podcast, are there any go-to resources or books or podcasts that you would recommend to our students as they continue their pursuit of internships and jobs and careers, and not only in the world of your industry and the tour and the golf industry, but professional sports as well? What sort of what because obviously you're an information overload all the time, but are there any go-tos that you have?
Vince, I'm going to answer that question honestly. I don't, and
Yeah.
it bothers our development people so much because I'm more of an intuitive person,
Really?
and not a big
Yeah.
reader of business things. When I read, I want to be taken away. So I apologize. I'm not going to help on that answer, but that's the honest truth.
But you made a good point though. Like you may read or listen to things out of an intellectual curiosity standpoint that may not be relevant to your job, but it still informs your thinking or your inspiration or something like that. So as we tell our kids, and now obviously there are so many trades in the sports industry. We've interviewed, Sports Business Journal, Front Office Sports, Sports Techie, D1 Ticker. Back in the quote unquote old days, I tell the kids, like, we used to have to go to the library and look up things called the yellow pages and encyclopedias and resource guides. They possess all this information at their fingertips and use it wisely on both sides of the equation, because if you've got somebody interviewing for a job at the tour, or you're gonna offer somebody a job, more than likely somebody within your organization is going to scrub their social pages. Is that correct?
100% correct. Absolutely true.
So share with our students and our listeners what we call it, the grandma test. If you don't want grandma to see it, don't post it. But they're being naive if we're not scrubbing those pages now, correct?
That is 100% correct. And anything that you place on social media, you need to assume it's permanent, and
Right.
is shared and known. And if you don't want that, then don't put it there.
Yeah, I think the headline on that is permanent. So this has been such an amazing conversation. Rick Anderson, Chief Media Officer of the PGA Tour, negotiated just unbelievable deals, billions and billions of dollars. Undergrad, Florida Gator, law degree, Florida Gator. But as you can tell, like he started his career as a corporate attorney in Atlanta, and now he's a major player in the professional sports world and responsible for the things that you see on air or in your hands, or the other opportunities where you can consume golf. So, Rick, we're honored and flattered you joined us today. We appreciate you being on. We know you're very, very busy, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your advice and wisdom with our students from Melt University. Virtual summer 2020, Melt University. We roll on.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.